The night the city lights flickered like dying stars, she stood on the edge of the old iron bridge with her toes curling over the cold metal railing. The wind slapped against her cheeks, carrying the distant echo of traffic and laughter from people who seemed to belong to a world she no longer recognized. Her heart thudded like a trapped bird as she looked down at the restless river swirling beneath her. It felt like the whole world had collapsed into that single moment, narrowing into one unbearable truth: she had nothing left. She took a breath, a deep, trembling one, ready to let go of everything. But before she could surrender herself to the darkness, a strong hand wrapped around her wrist, pulling her back with such urgency that it sent her stumbling into someone's chest. She heard a voice she didn't know, steady, warm, commanding, "Tell her, not tonight." And in the seconds that followed, her fate changed forever. If you believe in kindness, hope, and second chances, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It helps more people discover stories that remind them they're not alone. Her name was Zara Malik, a young woman whose life once brimmed with quiet dreams and simple joys. She had always been resilient, raised in a small town where she learned early that life rarely gave more than it took. She moved to the city with wide eyes and a heart full of hope, believing she could do something meaningful, something that made waking up each day feel worthwhile. But somewhere along the way, reality chipped away at her piece by piece. First came the job loss, just a short message reading, unfortunately, and suddenly her plans crumbled. Then came the flood of bills she couldn't keep up with, the landlord's warnings growing sharper, and the shame that clung to her like a heavy coat she couldn't remove. It wasn't just poverty that hurt her, it was the feeling of becoming invisible, as if the world had quietly decided she no longer mattered. Her closest friend had left for another city, her family was far away and struggling themselves, and the tiny network she once relied on slowly drifted apart. Loneliness became her shadow. Nights stretched endlessly as she lay awake listening to the hum of the city and the echo of her own fears. She tried, again and again, to find work. She walked for hours under the punishing sun, stood in crowded offices, sent countless applications, rehearsed hopeful smiles, until each rejection chipped away a little more of her strength. She wasn't weak, she had held on longer than most would have. But that night on the bridge, something inside her snapped. She simply felt tired, too tired to fight anymore. The stranger who pulled her back caught her off guard, not just because he saved her, but because he didn't look at her with pity or disgust. He didn't ask why she was there or judge her trembling hands. Instead, he stepped beside her as though they were two people simply sharing a moment on a bridge, not a woman breaking apart and a man witnessing it. His grip loosened only after she found her balance, but his presence lingered with a steady warmth. The river beneath them roared, but he stood firm like a lighthouse cutting through a storm. He was much older than her, though still youthful in the way he carried himself. Tall, sharply dressed, the kind of man whose polished shoes and tailored coat radiated quiet power. His face, illuminated by the dim streetlights, was calm but shadowed by something deeper, someone who had seen loss too. She didn't know it then, but his name was Raheel Dar, the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation, one of the most influential men in the city. Thousands recognized his name, but Zara, lost in her own battles, had no idea who he was. And maybe that was exactly why he stopped. In that moment, Raheel wasn't a CEO. He wasn't a billionaire. He was just a man who couldn't walk past someone who looked like they were carrying the same kind of invisible wounds he once had. Years before, he had lost his wife in an accident, and the grief had almost swallowed him. Success and wealth didn't shield him from heartbreak, in fact, they sometimes magnified the emptiness. He had stood on a bridge once too, fighting his own battles. Perhaps that was why Zara's trembling figure felt like a reflection of a past he hoped no one else would suffer alone. Without asking for details, he guided her away from the edge. They walked slowly to a nearby bench under a cluster of trees where the city's noise softened into a gentle hum. Zara didn't speak, not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't think anyone would understand. Raheel didn't pressure her. He simply sat beside her, silent but present, offering the kind of companionship that didn't need words. After a while, her tears came quietly, not in loud sobs but in soft streams that glistened in the faint glow of the streetlights. She covered her face, ashamed, but he placed a gentle hand near her, not touching, just close enough to let her know she wasn't alone. In the days that followed, Raheel didn't barge into her life. Instead, he checked in, small, thoughtful messages reminding her to eat, to rest, to try again one more day. Zara, still fragile, didn't know how to react to kindness that expected nothing in return. She didn't want charity. She didn't want to be someone's burden. But Raheel never treated her like that. Instead, he spoke to her as if she had value, as if her existence mattered, even if she couldn't see it. When she finally opened up about losing her job and struggling to survive, Raheel didn't offer money or a shortcut. He offered something far more powerful, faith. He told her she was allowed to break but also allowed to rebuild. He reminded her that strength wasn't about never falling, it was about rising after the fall. And though his words were simple, they reached a part of her she thought had died. He helped her find a small temporary job at one of his company's community branches, not telling anyone who she was or what she'd been through. He didn't want her to feel indebted, he simply gave her a chance to breathe again. At work, Zara began rediscovering parts of herself she had forgotten. The kindness she showed customers, her natural empathy, her quiet determination, it all started to blossom again. Slowly, she felt life trickle back into her veins. Raheel occasionally stopped by, pretending it was just routine oversight, though the staff always whispered behind him. He wasn't the kind of CEO who walked into small offices. But he came anyway, always greeting Zara with a soft smile that eased her tension. The two of them grew close in a way that didn't need labels. It wasn't romance, not yet. It was something rawer, deeper, a connection between two broken souls learning how to breathe again. Resilience bloomed within Zara like sunlight after a long monsoon. She started taking courses to improve her skills, waking up with purpose, and looking at the world with a little less fear. Raheel, watching from the background, felt a quiet pride swelling inside him. Not because he helped her, but because she found the strength to help herself. But life wasn't done testing her. One afternoon, Zara returned home to find an eviction notice on her door. Her landlord had sold the building without warning. Panic clawed up her throat as she packed her few belongings into a small bag. She didn't want to bother Raheel, but deep down she knew there was no one else she could turn to. When she finally dialed his number, her voice cracked, and he immediately sensed something was wrong. Within minutes, he arrived. He didn't ask her to explain, he saw everything in the way she hugged her arms around herself. He offered her a place to stay, not in his mansion, but in a small guest apartment near the city's gardens. It was quiet, safe, warm. And he told her she could stay only until she found something better. But Zara sensed the unspoken truth, he simply didn't want her facing another night alone. In the comfort of that small apartment, Zara rebuilt her life piece by piece. Months passed, filled with small victories, her first stable job, her improved skills, the way she smiled more easily. And Raheel, despite his powerful position, found himself looking forward to the gentle warmth she brought into his otherwise structured life. Eventually, Zara learned who he truly was, the billionaire CEO, the philanthropic mogul, the man whispered about in corporate circles. At first, she felt betrayed. Not because he lied, but because she thought she didn't belong in his world. But Raheel reassured her that the man on the bridge, that version of him, was more real than any headline. Their bond deepened. Not through grand gestures, but through shared struggles, quiet nights, and the understanding that sometimes life breaks people only to rebuild them with stronger foundations. One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, casting golden hues across the river, they returned together to the bridge where everything changed. Zara stood where she once stood alone, except now her hands were steady. Her heart no longer felt like a burden. She realized she didn't just survive, she transformed. And she didn't owe that to luck or charity, but to the moment someone cared enough to reach out. If this story touched your heart in any way, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps keep stories like these alive.